I'm sure that there are people in the Pentagon who are shocked by this and understand what it means. And, maybe the slap in the face worked for them. I think that's probably true. But again, they cannot, they are not the decision makers. And the political class seems to be unaffected. These people are living in la la land. And I think will continue to, I was hoping that they would start waking up at some point. And maybe there still will be some point at which they wake up, but I'm just not seeing it.
How much further ahead do you feel like the Russian and Chinese militaries are than the United States?
Well, I've heard that the Americans have something like this in development, but I think it's supposed to come out in 2027. Now, often, they'll give a date like that, and then they'll extend it and extend it again. Maybe it won't be 2030. So they're clearly at least a couple of years behind. And so, this is a real leap forward in technology. There's nothing like this. I think that the Chinese may have some kind of something similar, a prototype that they tested several months or maybe a year ago. This is the first one, but the Russians have actually used it in combat. It's not just that it's hypersonic. It's not just that it has the multiple maneuverable reentry vehicles, but it's also a glide vehicle. Apparently, this hasn't been confirmed, but this is what Theodore Postel, the rocket scientist from MIT, believes. He says he can't. He doesn't have enough data to make that statement conclusively, but he very strongly suspects, because based on the trajectory of this ICBM, I'm not an ICBM, but of a ballistic missile, it should have fallen well short of its target. So what he says must have happened was that this went out of the atmosphere, and then instead of just re-entering the atmosphere, the way that an ordinary ballistic missile would do, it's kind of skipped along the atmosphere for many more hundreds of miles and then descended. So it gives it a much greater range. And so just all around, this is revolutionary. And I think what Putin said is just absolutely true. There's just no defense against this. There's nothing even on the horizon that can defend against this. And the West doesn't have anything comparable. And maybe in 2 years they will. Maybe not. We'll see.
If they were headed towards an all-out clash between NATO and Russia and potentially China and Iran as well, to me it just seems like there's just no way that the West can win in any way. Like, why? Is there something that the West has that I'm not talking about? Because everything I've seen has just been pretty pathetic coming from the West in terms of all these special systems that we sent to Ukraine,
right?
As well as Israel, which is part of the West as well, using our military equipment.
Well, it's very effective against civilians in Gaza and Lebanon.
Right, but it all seems quite primitive. Everything that I'm seeing, it just seems like the same thing they've been doing for the past 30, 40 years, flying planes over and dropping bombs on people.
Right.
Like that's
right. Again, they're living in the 1990s. That was awesome back then, and they just completely, devastated Saddam Hussein's army.
Right.
Made short work of it.
Right.
But this is 30 years later.
Right, and if we talk about the missile exchanges between Iran and Israel, it's just clear that Iran also just has the upper hand in terms of ballistic missile technology, long-range missiles.
Right.
Israel doesn't have it. And even Iran, in my opinion, looks primitive compared to what Russia has. But Israel looks primitive compared to what Iran has. So it's like, what are we doing here? And it looks like... It's just, I can't wrap my head around it. I was just told all my whole life, America's number one.
Yeah.
No debate. Most powerful military. We can kick anybody's ass. No questions asked. I more or less had that belief until this war happened in Ukraine. And then I was like, I don't even think, I think we would struggle against Zimbabwe at this point. It's like, maybe not that bad. But you know what I mean. Yeah. It's just,
sure.
How did we get to this point? How did this happen? Like, how did we spend $1 trillion a year on our military-industrial complex?
Well, it's something actually. I think Brian Berletic describes it very well. He says that we have a for-profit military industry, and the Russians have a for-purpose, that's the term that he uses. And I think that's actually a good way to look at it. Okay, we have this. Okay, we have these for-profit corporations that churn out our missiles. Now, that doesn't mean they can't do a great job. And if you had a really clean system with, let's say, with good oversight and real competition between companies, it could actually be a very effective way to produce weapons. But the thing is, over time, these for-profit corporations have corrupted the whole process. We have what's called a revolving door. There's generals, retire and they become lobbyists for these corporations, and everybody knows that it's going to happen. So it's just like so even before they become lobbyists, they've already kind of cozied up to the corporations and give them, really lucrative contracts, and that's what it's all about. It's become a very cozy relationship between between the Pentagon and in general, the security state on the one hand, and these corporations on the other. And for them, it is all about profit on both sides. A lot of people, have done very well by the system. Many people have, and they have no interest in changing it. It's just that, in the end, it doesn't really meet the purpose. But these people don't care about that. It's about profit. And that's what's happened. So we have these big kind of flashy weapons with lots of bells and whistles on them that are over-engineered and actually extremely expensive. And that's actually the point of it. There's no incentive to actually keep costs down. The incentive is to increase the price tag, and then everybody gets a bigger share, right? So that's the way things are. That's the system in this country. So we have these big flashy systems, that used to do really well at the military expos in these various third world countries, and oil exporting countries like Saudi Arabia would buy them up. They were happy to have these big shiny toys. But this war in Ukraine has exposed the weakness of the system. First of all, it turns out we don't have very many. We're not able to produce them in sufficient quantities for a real war. And then second, that these are not nearly as effective as they were claimed to be. The Russians have found ways to neutralize all of them. And the Saudis and other people can see it. So, just as an example, the Saudis for the first time ever bought an air defense system from Russia just about a month ago. And I think that's just the beginning of a major trend, a shift away from American weapon systems.
So if the Saudis can see it and we can see it, why can't Western politicians see it? Why are they gearing up for a conflict with Russia?
They still live, because they believe that we are, in American exceptionalism. It is a religion to them. It's, that America is number one, and that America, has kind of a divine right to rule the world, and that any country that opposes America just simply is out of line and needs to be put back in line, needs to be punished. And that's the way Americans have looked at it ever since really the fall of the Soviet Union. That was when the Soviet Union fell, then that's when you got these theories that this is the end of history, that basically we won and we've won forever. And we're now at the top of the heap, and that's the way things are. And that, clearly it isn't, but all these people, the political class has this imperial mindset that, and they can't seem to get out of it. I think in some ways, it's analogous to what you saw in China. I mean, there's some big differences, but there's also some real similarities. There was a time when China was, it was never world power because we didn't have world powers back then, 1,000 years ago. But 1,000 years ago, the Tang Dynasty was mighty, and so much mightier than any country within that China. every other kingdom that China had contact with was so small and puny in comparison, and China was so prosperous and so rich, and this went on dynasty after dynasty, century after century, that it just became ingrained that that's who we are. China is the middle kingdom. China is civilization. Barbarism is out there. They're cute little people, and we'll pat them on the head if we choose not to invade them. Actually, China was not very aggressive. There were wars on the borders, and China did expand, but rather slowly. But then, with the first contact of the Europeans, let's say starting more or less, it was even earlier, but starting in the 18th century, the Chinese at that point, the ones who were paying attention, saw, oh, these aren't just cute little foreigners. They have technologies we don't have. They have powers, a military power that we don't have. But the Chinese didn't wake up. There was just this complacency, this sense that, this is who we are, and it's just pointless to think anything else. And that went on to the very end until the collapse of the empire, when China was already being carved up by these foreign powers. I think it was just very, very difficult for them to adjust to the new reality. And I think it's I don't want to take this too far, but I think it's somewhat similar. It's just like, that's our reality. America is number one. And, don't talk to me about this other stuff. It's just like, that's the basic truth of the situation. So what are you talking to me about ATACMS or whatever? I don't want to hear it. I think pretty much that's what Biden said, remember, when he was asked if it would be a mistake for America to be fighting two wars at once. And the answer is, hey, we're the United States of America, the most powerful military force on the planet. That's end of story. What are you talking about? And I think that's how they all think. I mean, there's just this real kind of smugness, complacency, and hubris. It's an imperial hubris. And maybe that's how a lot of empires end up falling, that over time they're the great empire, and then it goes to their heads, and they start to think, well, we have this natural right. It wasn't an accident of history. It wasn't because actually maybe our forefathers were really remarkable. It's just like, we Americans, we Chinese, we just have the right to rule. We were somehow divinely appointed to do this. But I think the current situation is actually much scarier than what happened in China, because that Chinese power that fell, that empire, was very conservative and cautious and inward looking. And now we have a combination of an empire that is falling, but that is also in the grips of some sort of ideological zeal. It has an ideology that it wants to export and impose on the rest of the world. So you have an empire that is in decline. It is not admitting it, and at the same time is being is on a crusade to actually spread its ideology and its power throughout the world. And I think that's an extremely dangerous combination. That's what we see.
Right. I mean, it's way scarier than the China story, because we have nuclear weapons now.
Yeah, right. And that's in the mix. Exactly.
Yeah. So you really think that these people, they just won't wake up? They will just refuse? They're in the grips of...
Well, so far, I just don't see the evidence of it. I just don't. That's the unfortunate truth. I was, sometimes I'm hopeful. And again, there may be some point at which they wake up. Either that happens, or the other thing to hope for is, like, especially in Europe, that some of these dissident parties are able to actually take power. Whether it's in Austria, Germany, France, those are all places where it could happen, and change policy, change course, but we may not have time to do that. I mean, really, right. It's a very scary situation. I'll have to admit it, just on reflection. It's just that, like, this rhetoric coming from Macron is really, the guy's not an idiot, That's one thing you can say about him. He's actually a smart guy. Some of these other people, you wonder, like Baerbock or whatever in Germany. I think she is a true idiot. Old 360 Baerbock. But But Macron is not. He's a smart guy, but he's an imperialist. He can't let go of empire. For him, it's the Western Empire and the French Empire within the Western Empire, and that's something he can't let go of.
Right. Yeah. We really need more leaders within NATO standing up, to say no to this. I mean, good on Maloney. I think Italy is voiced.
Well, even Olaf Scholz, for all his. Yeah. I mean, I find the guy just disgusting, a human worm, but he has held firm on that, and he seems to understand, that is something that is a red line that he just cannot cross. He has that understanding. But the guy who's likely to replace him does not. He's actually really gung-ho about, shooting Taurus missiles into Russia. And again, these Taurus missiles can easily hit Moscow. They have a much longer range.
Right. Yeah, Mertz. And that's supposed to be, February 20th or something like that?
Yeah, something like that, right.
Right. So it's, we're running out of time. If Trump doesn't make a firm statement and says that he wants to end this, then it's going to start getting scary. And then if Olaf Scholz goes out and we got Mertz in, then we're looking at some really serious escalation, I think, at this point.
Yeah,
that this is the time to start looking at flights to South Africa. It could. Is that crazy? Is it time to fly to South Africa?
That's not crazy, no.